Can you hear me now? It got unplugged, dang it. Alright, well, sorry about that. I was just saying, good morning. This week we're trying a new thing. I am going to try and do some streams in the early morning, because I am an early bird and I'm always awake anyway, and then do game streams later in the afternoon. Hopefully to give folks in different time zones the ability to tune in and to let us read through more books, since we have so many projects going on. Thank you for joining me, Anna, Robin, and Maddie. Tomorrow I may try 8 a.m., see if more of our other time zones can tune in then. But for today, we're going to read some more of Heaven Official's Blessing. Last time we had started Book 2, and we were just in the beginning of the flashback section of the story. Book 2 is going to be all in the past in the country of Xianle, with Xilian and his buddies, and explaining what happened to them to get them to where they were in Book 1. So here we go. Chapter 61, Lost Red Pearl, Eyes Red with Desire. Aw, thank you, Maddie. Thank you for the support. Xilian pulled at his earlobes. One of the earrings is gone. The people of Xianle believed that the pinnacle of cultivation was the harmony of yin and yang, the unity of male and female. The form of the gods was inexhaustibly ever-changing, and naturally unbound by gender restrictions, shifting to men or women as they willed. Thus, this belief was woven into the design of the god-pleasing costume. Throughout history, every god-pleasing martial warrior had donned adornments and accessories that possessed the form and details of both sexes, such as earrings, bracelets, and so on. My music is not doing what it's... Oh, there it is. When Xilian was preparing for the role, he pierced his ears and put on a pair of earrings. It was a pair of brilliantly deep red coral pearls, lustrous and smooth. Radiant and opulent, rare and sublime. However, when Xilian was combing his hair just then, only one of the pair of red coral pearls was left. The moment he said it was lost, Mu Qing's relaxed expression froze again, but the other two did not notice at all. Feng Xin looked all over the chamber first, inside and out, but returned empty-handed. You're so scatterbrained, even something worn on your ears can be lost. I didn't find it in the pavilion of Xianle, so I'll go out and look on the roads. Pray to the heavens you didn't lose it during the parade. Xilian was puzzled too, but didn't care much for it. Maybe. If that's the case, then there'd be no way you'd find it. If it's lost, it's lost. Mu Qing, on the other hand, brought out the broom he usually used to sweep. He said quietly, "That pearl is too precious. We should at least try and look. Maybe it rolled under the bed or a shelf." He then started sweeping, and Xilian responded, "Then why don't we call for a few more hands to help? Crowds get handsy. We don't want people sneaking it in their pockets before we find anything," Feng Xin said offhandedly. Mu Qing was quietly checking under the bed, but when he heard Feng Xin's words, his face momentarily turned a shade of deathly white. He rose to his feet in a fit, and crack! The broom in his hands broke in two. Xilian was startled. Ever since they left the Great Martial Hall, Feng Xin was filled with complaints about Mu Qing, but the words never left his lips. Now that he saw Mu Qing blew up first, he got angry too. "What are you doing, breaking things so suddenly? Who pissed you off now?" Mu Qing replied coldly. "Why don't you tell me straight what it is you want to say, instead of casting shadows where there are none? I have nothing to do with the lost pearl." Feng Xin had always been a straightforward individual, and this was the first time hearing someone accuse him of casting shadows where there are none, and he puffed a laugh from anger. "Why don't you tell that to yourself? What did I say? I didn't say you stole it, but you got all flustered. What, feeling guilty?" Xilian broke out of his shock and sat up on the bed, feeling dread. "Feng Xin, that's enough!" A few veins popped instantly on Mu Qing's forehead. Feng Xin didn't really think much of it and asked in confusion, "What?" It really wasn't the right time for Xilian to explain, so he could only try and pacify Mu Qing. "Don't misunderstand. Feng Xin's comments were offhanded. He wasn't directing them at you." Mu Qing clenched his fists tight, then loosened them, but at last did not continue to blow up. However, his eyes were growing red, and he turned to Shi Lian, enunciating each word as he stared at him. You don't keep your promises. No, you're wrong, Shi Lian cried. Mu Qing closed his mouth and inhaled a few times, threw a furious stink eye at Feng Xin, then without another word ran from the door. Shi Lian jumped off the bed and was about to give chase, but was stopped in mid-step. Your Highness, you haven't even put on shoes. It'd be a disgrace going out with your hair down in such a mess. Help me stop him, Shi Lian ordered. At least put on your shoes first and tie up your hair, Feng Xin said, and leave him be. He's always weird like this. Who knows what nerves we touch now, going mental out of the blue. I love you, Feng Xin, but you're so dumb. So dumb. It is obvious what Mu Qing's problem is. He's the only commoner, and everyone always accuses him of everything. Mu Qing was long gone by then, and Shi Lian saw he wouldn't be able to catch up, so instead he grabbed a hair tie to fasten his hair in a rush. As he did so, he sighed and said, He wasn't going mental. You just accidentally said the wrong thing. Feng Xin brought out Shi Lian's usual white training garb from the closet and threw it at him. What did I say wrong? Shi Lian replied as he slipped on his boots. I can't tell you. Anyway, come with me to go find him and tell him it was all a misunderstanding and that you weren't accusing him of anything. Feng Xin frowned. What is it you can't tell me? Shi Lian's lips were sealed tight. Feng Xin was becoming more suspicious and thought back on Mu Qing's furious expression. He spoke up. He didn't actually steal from you before, did he? Shi Lian immediately waved vigorously. No, no, no! Seeing him like this, Feng Xin was even more sure. So that's it! No wonder his temper flared. It's because he was guilty! So what did he steal? Not so loud, Shi Lian hushed anxiously. Feng Xin lowered his voice. Something like this happened and you didn't tell me. Tell me now! Shi Lian saw that Feng Xin was already suspicious. If he continued to lie, it'd be found out either way, so woefully he had to relent. It doesn't really count as stealing, but I'll start from the beginning. You remember, right? 2 years ago, when I first entered the Royal Holy Pavilion, there was once a lost leaf of gold foil. Hearing this, Feng Xin's eyes widened and he slapped his thigh. That time? 3 years ago, Shi Lian begged and pleaded in all manner of ways until finally his parents relented and permitted him to enter the Royal Holy Pavilion for training before the age of 20. A year later, the pavilion of Xianle completed construction. Shi Lian could at last move in, and he did so with great excitement. When Shi Lian first moved in, he really didn't bring a lot with him. Only 2 carriages full of books and 200 treasured swords. But the queen loved her son dearly and was afraid the training life would be too quiet and boring. So later she ordered for 20 servants and 4 large carriages full of trinkets the crown prince loved to be sent to Mount Taisong. The mountain caravans, impressive and dramatic. Indeed, in this was a set of 108 leaves that make up the Golden Foil Palace. Building a palace out of golden foils was a popular game enjoyed by the Xianle nobility. At the time, to have so much luxury enter the mountain caused a small wave of complaints. The Royal Holy Pavilion consisted of serious cultivators who weren't quite familiar with the prince's character just yet, and although they couldn't say much publicly, behind his back there was much chatter. Did His Highness the Crown Prince come to train or come to play? What could this son of the royal family cultivate if he only came for fun? When Feng Xin heard those grievances, he had the mind to dispute them, but Shi Lian told him not to worry about it and smiled. It's only natural they should think that way. They'll know after a while I'm not here to play games, and also who the number 1 in this generation of trainees is. However, not long after, something happened. Shi Lian was trying to send away as many of the 4 large carriages and servants the queen gifted him as possible, but when he counted the inventory, he found that in the 108 leaves of gold foils, 1 was missing. The set of gold foils was packed in the carriages, and once at Mount Taisong, it had never left the pavilion of Xianle. If it wasn't lost on the road, it had been stolen. Nothing was found on the road, so Shi Lian brought it up offhandedly to the Guoshi. Guoshi. I think I'm saying that right now. G-U-O has a W sound in it, kind of. Yeah, early Shi Lian is very spoiled, but very nice, as far as nobility goes. Far sweeter and more empathetic than most of them would be, because at his heart, he has a good character. But it's clear that he has not suffered at this point. And of course, the rest of the story is going to be about him suffering. However, when the Guoshi thought it might have been stolen, he became enraged at the idea that someone within the Royal Holy Pavilion would commit this crime under the allure of golden foils. So he was determined to recover the golden leaf no matter what. If it should be found on the person of anyone, the punishment would be severe to the utmost. Thus, all 3,000 and more disciples of Mount Taisong had to stop what they were doing, got dragged into forming teams to search room after room, chamber after chamber of every single training hall. It was a huge fanfare, tiring out everyone. Yet unexpectedly, halfway through the search, Shi Lian suddenly corrected himself, apologized for causing everyone trouble, and said he remembered that he'd seemed to have already lost a leaf from the set while still at the royal palace, meaning there should only be 107 leaves total, after all. In order to investigate the whereabouts of the missing gold foil, that night the Holy Royal Pavilion was complete chaos, utter pandemonium. And right when everyone was sweating with exhaustion to have His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly make such an announcement, to never mind after all, it was inevitable for many to feel aggrieved. Thus, for the longest time, there was a lot of noise behind his back. Things like, well, he was the Crown Prince, so he got to call the shots, and hopefully next time his memory would be better and remember important things before calling for an investigation, and so on. Feng Xin was furious listening to it, but Shi Lian told him to let it go, and let time pass quietly. Sure enough, after that, Shi Lian was indeed able to change things around completely, rising to unashamedly become the #1 trainee of the Royal Holy Pavilion, over all 3,000 and some disciples. Because he was truly friendly and easygoing, and not at all dependent on his background, gradually his reputation improved amongst the others. Feng Xin wasn't one to remember the petty details, so he'd forgotten this had happened. Now that it was brought up again, it dawned on him, and he was shocked and angry. It was Mu Qing who walked away with that gold foil? Shh! Shi Lian hushed him and looked around to make sure no one was around. The gold foil leaf fell out of the rattling carriage while coming up the mountain. Mu Qing was passing by carrying water and found it in the bushes. He kept it under his bed and hadn't figured out what to do with it. But that night, the Gyoshi suddenly struck, ordering everyone to search the rooms. I didn't know him at the time and only saw an errand boy who looked distraught. Later, while I was sitting outside, he came to serve me tea and admitted everything. That's how I found out. Taking without telling is stealing, so you helped him bury the matter and told everyone the gold foil was lost in the royal palace? Whilst they were talking, Shi Lian had finished dressing and headed out the door. That's how it is. Feng Xin was going to die from rage. He followed after Shi Lian. Your Highness, do you know that when you first came to the Royal Pavilion, just how many people talked shit about you? Keep it down, Shi Lian said. He really did look quite distraught at the time, pale as a ghost. People at the Royal Pavilion already dislike him. If I had said anything, his life there would be over. Our places in life are different, and we stand on different vantage points in the matter, so the consequences can't be compared. Shi Lian's already a lot smarter about society than his friends are. Feng Xin is clearly also very spoiled. You know, the idea that, just obviously a very poor person saw an abandoned piece of expensive gold on the ground. How could you blame them for taking it? And then to still admit what happened. Mu Qing deserved better. Just then, a few young trainees approached them and courteously bowed, their faces full of smiles greeting them. Your Highness! Shi Lian smiled back, and the two parties brushed past each other. He said to Feng Xin, See, I told you to give it time. Now I get along with everyone. Who dare say anything bad about me? The two of them entered Mu Qing's bedchamber, but didn't see a soul, so they exited again to keep searching. I already thought it strange at the time, since I'd never known you to have lost any leaves in the palace, Feng Xin said. But I can't believe you didn't tell me about this for 2 years, and you even told me you met him while he was sweeping. Later he asked me not to tell anyone, Shi Lian said. Since I agreed, of course I wouldn't tell, not even you. But now you must know I'm the one who went back on my word. You mustn't tell anyone else." "How does that even count as going back on your word?" Feng Xin said. "It's not like you told me anything. It's his own guilty conscience making him freak out that gave him away." No. You promise me right now this stops here. Otherwise, I'll break up my relationship with you and you'll be cursed to never find a wife." Shi Lian threatened. Feng Xin. It literally says he piffed. "You break up with me. The day after our breakup, everyone in the kingdom of Xianle will know one thing. His Highness the Crown Prince fainted from overtight suspenders while dressing himself." Fine, I won't say a word. Who gives a shit about gossip anyway? Oh my god, these two are so cute. "I'll break up my relationship with you and you'll never find a wife." I'd love to know more about what this, like, I know it's not actually saying they are together. It's their friendship, their the servant and master, I guess, but it's just such a cute little, "You'll never find a wife without me." After a pause, he still decided to comment. "I bet he thinks I'm always picking on him because he thought I knew about the gold foil, but really, I just don't like people like him. A grown man thinking too much about this and that. He must have suspected you told me a long time ago. Even concubines in a harem don't have thoughts and moods as twisted as his." Ugh, so annoying. "It's not as bad as you say," Shi Lian said. "The Royal Holy Pavilion had never lost anything before, meaning this was his first time, and at the end of the day it was for his mother. Anyway, he already assuredly promised me he'd never do it again, so giving him another chance isn't wrong, and he kept his word. Besides, today, when that little kid fell, if Mu Qing didn't cooperate with me, the parade wouldn't have ended so smoothly." Seriously, Mu Qing is what keeps these two idiots alive. Feng Xin clicked his tongue. "You're already going down in history for only 3 rounds around the capital. Of course he wouldn't do anything else to you. Your Highness, I'm gonna say this right now. I don't believe a word of anything he said at the Great Martial Hall. Who here in the Royal Holy Pavilion doesn't know that when the Gyoshi plays cards, he hears and sees no one? He had to pick that time to pass on the message and stubbornly refused to clarify under whose orders he was sent, as if he was purposefully trying to screw things up." Shi Lian shook his head and said gravely, "Actually, in regards to this, I might have been indelicate too. I knew Mu Qing is disliked, so originally I wanted to have him run more errands for me. Let people know he's my personal attendant, so they'd be nicer to him. I didn't realize things were already nasty to that point. Not only did things get messed up, he got bullied too. If you think about it from another angle, you'll find his moodiness understandable." Feng Xin disagreed wholeheartedly. "Why is it your fault he's moody? You're the crown prince. How did you end up owing anyone anything for promoting them? Your Highness, I really don't understand why you think so highly of him." This guy's so dumb. Shi Lian grinned. "Feng Xin, did you know? There are so many people in this world that are nothing but rocks in my eyes." Feng Xin didn't understand. Shi Lian walked with his hands behind his back. "Rocks are everywhere, but precious jades are hard to come by. When it comes to martial arts, I've only seen 2 people who could be called jades. One is you, the other is him." Aw, the hands behind the back thing, I think that's supposed to be like he's taking on a scholarly, like, he's walking down the hall with his hands behind his back saying something very scholarly about how awesome his friends are. So cute. He suddenly stopped in his step, turned his head around, his eyes shining brightly. "I truly think that Mu Qing is extremely gifted. Such a precious jade. How could it be left to collect dust and hide its beauty just because of background and temper?" Shi Lian looked determined. "No, I think that's wrong. You ask why I think so highly of him? It's the same reason as why I think so highly of you. Ones that are destined to shine, I must let them shine. Besides, I don't believe goodwill brings bad returns." It does eventually bring good returns. Feng Xin stopped too. After listening to Shi Lian's speech, he scratched his head. "As long as you know what you want, how you do it is your business." "Yeah, so where did Mu Qing run off to?" Shi Lian said. Just then, another couple of young trainees approached them, a basket in their hands, playing around. When they saw Shi Lian, they called to him in unison, their voices happy. "Your Highness!" Shi Lian responded with a smile too. The trainees came up to them and thrust the basket before them, saying happily, Will your highness have some cherries? They've been washed in the springs already, very clean and very sweet. The basket was full of vivid little round red cherries, looking rather precious. Shi Lian and Feng Xin picked out a few to eat, and they were indeed juicy and sweet. One of the young trainees asked, "When we walked over, we heard your highness asked about Mu Qing. Were you looking for him? I think we saw him when we passed through the cherry woods." "Is that right? Thanks for letting me know," Shi Lian said. Thus the two hastily walked towards the cherry woods. Atop Mount Taisong, other than the abundant wild maples, there were also many fruit trees, peaches, pears, oranges, and also cherries. The fruit trees were nourished by springs, bathed in the mountainous mist and sunny dews, bearing fruits filled with spiritual aura. Other than offering them as tribute to the palace, the rest were reserved for disciples in the pavilion, who could munch them after a hard day's work. Outside the Royal Holy Pavilion, it would be hard to buy even a single one with 100 gold pieces. The cherry trees stood row after row, and within the fresh new leaves hung beads and beads of red pearl-like cherries, looking delightfully enticing. Shi Lian and Feng Xin walked for a while, looking for Mu Qing in the woods, but soon after they heard quarreling voices coming from ahead of where they were, and unconsciously slowed to a stop. I think it's interesting that everything in these chapters, the cherries, the pearl, the chapter title, Red Eyes, very heavily focused on red. And I know that at least the red string of fate is very heavily associated with, like, destiny and connection between, I don't know if it's soulmates, but, like, people that are meant to be connected. I wonder if all the red isn't meant to say something about these early years where these characters are becoming friends or meeting each other, and then for hundreds of years their destinies will be intertwined. Chapter 62. Lost Red Pearl, Inadvertent Eyes Red with Desire, Part 3. Ahead of them stood 4 or 5 white-robed trainees, each with a basket in hand, appearing to have come to pick fruits. However, they weren't encircling any fruit trees, but rather a person. Even from afar, with their power of hearing, they could still clearly hear the particulars of the quarrel. One of the young men said, "No wonder there seems to be less fruit in the woods lately. So someone's been squatting and stealing." A soft voice replied, "The fruits grown on Mount Taisong can be picked by anyone who's a disciple at the pavilion, so how is it stealing? Besides, there's hundreds and thousands of fruit trees here. There's no way there'd be less fruit by my power alone." The voice belonged to Mu Qing, and from the sleeve corner that could be seen through the crowd, it looked like he'd already taken off the black ghost costume and changed back to the usual plain training outfit. The trainee humphed. "Of course it was only you picking yourself the fruit. But you don't just pick for yourself, do you? You sneak them down the mountain for other people, exploiting the benefits. How shameful." Oh yeah. Sneaking cherries down the mountain to poor people. So shameful. I actually meant how shameless. I don't know why my brain changed the word. I'm so mad for Mu Qing. Shi Lian understood this situation immediately. The trainees who couldn't stand Mu Qing were picking on him again. Mu Qing came from a poor family. His mother, who lived at the foot of the mountain in the city, led a meager life. In the past, she could only make money from seamstressing here and there, but after her eyes went bad, she could no longer do that work, and could only wait for Mu Qing to bring home the money he'd earned running errands on the mountain. Sometimes he would pick up fresh fruit from Mount Taisong to have her try, and it wasn't really anything major, because there weren't any rules against it. Nonetheless, when spoken out loud, it sounded bad. To have it brought up like this was even more insulting and embarrassing. Mu Qing's voice was laced with ice. "Zhu Shishong, we usually rarely talk, but you have picked on me again and again. Yesterday, you wouldn't let me through to the Shishang Pavilion to pass on word. How have I offended you?" The young man named Zhu. Zhu? I think it's Zhou. Was indeed the trainee that guarded the door to the Shishang Pavilion. When he heard the matter from the day brought up, his anger flared. "You're the one who wasn't mindful enough to do your job and almost botched the event, so why are you blaming me? You should blame yourself for acting all secretive, making other people think you're up to no good. If you'd said outright what you were doing, nothing would have happened. Thanks to you, His Highness almost messed up, and I got yelled at by the Guoshi." He threw the basket to the ground as he griped, gesturing for everyone to go in to attack. Shi Lian couldn't watch anymore and shouted, "Stop!" When the trainees heard his voice, they were all shocked, turning their heads, and called, "Your Highness!" Shi Lian and Feng Xin approached, and by then, Zhou Shishong had already grabbed Mu Qing by the shoulder. Mu Qing's voice was laced... Oh, no. Why does it do that? Sorry, I'm using a new book reader, and it changed pages very weirdly. Hello, Pablo. Welcome. Yes, I'm trying a new thing where I do early morning streams for different time zones, but tomorrow we may try it like 8-ish because we have like 3 people here. I know I have people in other time zones, but I also know that 90% of my audience is in my time zone. And unfortunately, I'm the only early bird I know. Everyone else stays up until like 3, 4 a.m. All my friends are night owls. I can't do it. I'm so old. Shi Lian and Feng Xin approached, and by then, Zhou Shishong had already grabbed Mu Qing by the shoulder and had pushed him against the trunk of a tree. The brawl had not yet started. If they really did start, even if there was 1 against 20, Mu Qing would have gained the upper hand. But if he wanted to stay in the royal pavilion, he must never raise his fist. How do these people not realize? Like, Feng Xin's like, why is he's so weird. You shouldn't... He's literally getting beat up all the time, and he can't defend himself because he's poor, and they'll kick him out if he does. Like, God. Poor Mu Qing. Shi Lian smiled. What's everyone doing? That Zhou Shishong was a decent, plain-looking young man and looked up to the crown prince. He froze hearing Shi Lian's inquiry and hurriedly let go of Mu Qing. We were... Shi Lian continued to smile. Although I don't know why everyone is quarreling. Mu Qing is my personal attendant, so if he does anything, it's generally under my command. I didn't realize there was some sort of problem in having him pick some fruit for me. The trainees all bowed. No! It was His Highness that asked him to come? We misunderstood. On the side, Mu Qing leaned against the tree and was taken aback when he heard Shi Lian say he was coming here under his command. He righted his collar, lowered his head, and didn't speak. Cold sweat was rolling down the backs of the trainees as they profoundly apologized to Shi Lian, then to Mu Qing, and finally hurried away after picking up their baskets, escaping the cherry woods. Shi Lian saw the basket Mu Qing had brought on the ground and bent down and picked it up to pass to him. Want some help? Mu Qing didn't take the basket, but raised his head and watched Shi Lian with an unreadable expression for a moment before he spoke. Your Highness. What is it? Shi Lian said. Why must you always show up at times like these? Feng Xin on the... okay, so... I don't know how to say these kind of things. Sometimes in these books, they will have it'll, like, just say the character's name and just say question mark, which I guess I would just read as Shi Lian, question mark, but, basically it means they didn't say anything. They were just... Feng Xin, on the other hand, became upset. What do you mean? Is it wrong for him to come and save you? Mu Qing gave him a look and took the basket. Feng Xin stiffened and said, Listen up! What happened before was my fault. I didn't mean to accuse you, and everything was said offhandedly. There's no need for you to think deeply about anything, suspecting this or that. I don't care for anything other than His Highness, and I'm not interested in gossip. That's all I have to say, so stop being so moody. At first, Shi Lian thought his words were too aggressive, but towards the end it was strangely funny. Mu Qing glared at Feng Xin, and Shi Lian waved his hand. All right. Everything Feng Xin said is true. Let's forget anything happened. Nothing's happened. A moment later, Mu Qing said begrudgingly, I'll look for the red coral pearl again later. Maybe it was dropped in the street. It wouldn't be good for Shi Lian to look too much like he didn't care, so he replied, All right, only if you have the time. But if it was dropped on the streets, it'll have gotten picked up by somebody by now. It seemed Mu Qing had nothing more to say, so he picked up the cherries that were dropped on the ground and put them back into the basket. He didn't pick that many in the first place, and moved to leave the woods. Shi Lian, however, saw many enticing fresh cherries, and casually picked a bunch and dropped them into the basket. Mu Qing was slightly taken aback. Shi Lian said, Next time you want to pick fruits for your mother, just say you're picking them under my command, and no one will say anything. The Guoshi told me to return to the palace for a few days, so I plan on leaving tomorrow. Why don't you make your visit down the mountain, too? Let's head back for today. It took a while, but at last Mu Qing said in a quiet voice, Thank you, Your Highness.
He's so good, Dale.
The next day, Shi Lian descended the mountain with Feng Xin and Mu Qing in tow. The moment they reached the mountain, the foot of the mountain, right outside the giant mountain gates, they saw a shining golden carriage. A young man, dressed in a collared brocade with whip in his hand, was lying in the front seat of the carriage, his legs crossed, looking lively and important. The second he saw Shi Lian exiting the gates, he leapt to his feet and ran towards him in a mad dash, shouting in obvious joy, "Cousin Crown Prince!" Oh no, it's him. Naturally, it was Qi Rong, and only he would have the free time to wait for Shi Lian at the foot of Mount Taisong. He skipped over and cried, "My patience is finally paid off!" Shi Lian grinned and ruffled his hair, laughing. "Did Qi Rong grow taller again? How did you know I was returning to the palace today?" Qi Rong giggled. "I didn't. I just waited and knew you'd have to come out sooner or later. I refused to believe you wouldn't." "You're quite free, aren't you?" Shi Lian said helplessly. "Are you studying properly? What about sword practice? If Mother asks me to test your studies again, I won't help you." Qi Rong blinked, his eyes shifty, and suddenly jumped up and down. "Never mind all that. Look at my new carriage! Cousin Crown Prince, come and board it! Ride my carriage back to the palace!" He grabbed Shi Lian's hand and pulled him to the carriage, but Shi Lian only felt danger. "You're driving?" Feng Xin and Mu Qing approached too. Technically, servants must sit at the front, but Qi Rong's face dropped immediately, cracking the whip in his hand. "I asked Cousin Crown Prince to get on, but I didn't say you two too. Think I'd let lowlives touch my golden coach? Get the hell out of here!" Shi Lian quietly barked, "Qi Rong!" Feng Xin had met Qi Rong many times before, and already knew of his potty mouth, his vulgar and condescending character. But Mu Qing had never entered the palace before, and had never gotten the chance to go near the prince, Xiaojing. Qi Rong was feeling extremely aggrieved, but seeing Shi Lian about to walk away, he painfully and begrudgingly consented, the two shitty lowlives, to board his precious golden coach. However, they had only just entered the coach, and all three of them immediately regretted the decision. Qi Rong drove like a madman, the whip in his hand, lashing nonstop, screaming who knows what, and the white horse neighed in shock, the wheels spinning frantically, thrashing down the streets, refusing to stop no matter how much Shi Lian screamed for him to. They almost crashed into a number of pedestrians and stalls, and thank goodness for Feng Xin and Mu Qing, who sat at the front and grabbed the reins to sidetrack the horse. Otherwise, this berserk journey was going to cost at least 20 lives. When they finally reached the palace and the coach slowed down, Shi Lian, Feng Xin, and Mu Qing all breathed a sigh of relief. Shi Lian wiped off his cold sweat, and the other two had been lashed by Qi Rong's whip a number of times, their hands covered in welts. Yet Qi Rong rose to his feet, one leg stepping on the white horse's behind. He proclaimed proudly, "What do you think, Cousin Crown Prince? I drive pretty well, right?" Shi Lian got off the carriage and replied, "I'm going to tell Father and Mother to confiscate your coach." Qi Rong was shocked. "What?" Regarding Xianle culture, 1. They loved gold. 2. They loved precious stones. 3. They loved beauties. 4. They loved music. And 5. They loved art. The palace of Xianle was thus the most distinguished place, where all that they loved coalesced. Traversing through the large courtyard, walking down the crimson hallway, not everything was gilded or built of jade, as there were also masterpiece paintings hung all around and soft music wafting in the air, creating the illusion of paradise. The palace was Shi Lian's home, the place where he grew up. Feng Xin was chosen to be his personal guard at the age of 14 and had long gotten used to the sight. However, it was Mu Qing's first time seeing such a building, and he couldn't help but be awed. Yet the more awed he was, the more careful he became, and the more he didn't dare to have others sense what he was feeling, didn't dare to take a wrong step. Poor baby. Shi Lian went to meet with the queen straight away. The queen was resting at Qifeng Manor, leaning on a small tea table, tasting new leaves. She had long received the message that the crown prince had returned. Her eyes crescent-shaped in joy, she extended both arms before her son walked near. She said, "Finally willing to come home to see Mom." Feng Xin and Mu Qing stood outside. Shi Lian entered the chamber with Qi Rong in tow, and he reached out to hold his mother's hands when he approached. "Didn't I just visit 2 months ago?" The queen grumbled. What a heartless child. Even she wrong. Or no, she calls him wrong air, which is like a cutesy name for someone that you're close to. Let's see, it says, heir is the word for son or child. When added to a name, it becomes an affectionate tag, like saying Sonny or Little. So it's like a little nickname, wrong heir. Even wrong heir knew to keep an old woman like me company, but here you are, sounding all self-righteous when you haven't come home for 2 months. Shilian laughed. And how is mother old? You look no more than 10-something, like we're of the same generation. The queen was jubilant hearing these words of praise. Even if she had a son as old as Shilian, because of her status and wealth, she was very well maintained and still looked the part of a noble beauty. Still, the word that left her lips was light admonishment. Flatterer. Shilian glanced at the small tea table, and there was a jaded cup, its contents emitting a strange fragrance. He asked curiously, "What's this?" and picked it up. But the queen warned, "Don't drink it. You can't drink that." Alright, we're gonna have to stop there. I'm probably gonna only do 2 chapters for a little bit per reading because I don't want to wear my voice out. I need to build back up my stamina because it's already gone hoarse. Oh. But hopefully eventually I'll get back to being able to read for longer. We're gonna do 2 chapters every morning of the Heaven Official's Blessing, Scum Villain, Female General Eldest Princess, and the 2 horror stories, Shin Megami Tensei story and Demon City Shinjuku. We'll probably do the horror on Tuesday, Thursdays, and the other 3 on the others. Fridays will sometimes be other things. I enjoy reading these in the morning, and then we'll do games later. I think that'll be fun. But we may try maybe 8 o'clock tomorrow, see if more folks can join in at 8. Because I'd like to at least try to get 10 people for readings. We got higher up once we got further in the stream, but early morning, 7 o'clock, doesn't seem to be good for most folks. We'll try 8 tomorrow and see. Why am I such an early bird? If only I could be a late nighter like the population of my generation. Thanks for joining me, and I guess I will see you guys in a couple hours for video games, hopefully. Have a good morning. I'll see you later. Bye.